An eternal optimist, glass half full, things are always going to work out, second child syndrome. I've been called all of those things. Let me just start by giving one snippet. 5 years ago, we're at the tail end of COVID. I had recently sold my company in 2019, thought we had enough money to retire. And then I'm sitting home during COVID. I started doing things that I had no business doing, like day trading and things that I thought I could figure out because, like always, I always thought that I was smart enough to figure things out on my own. And then I realized I need something to do to keep me occupied or I'm just going to go broke. Ended up reaching out, a friend of mine. He's a venture capitalist. He made an introduction to one of his companies, and that company was called PadSplit. Ironically, I'd heard about PadSplit like 3 years prior when they first launched, but I was in the middle of my distribution company and it's not something that I was ready to do. So that's when timing comes in. So fast forward, and they were looking for somebody to come in and help with operations. That was my whole background. I'd run and sold and grew a distribution logistics company. I was a boar's head distributor for several years, almost like 13 years, sold that business off. And I wanted to do something because my mind is such that I want to stay busy. So let's get into it. I took a job and the salary was low, but for me, it wasn't a monetary decision. I was at a place where I was chasing curiosity. I was chasing intellectual growth. I wanted to learn something new. And this allowed me to pivot from logistics and distribution into real estate. And I had heard all sorts of stories about people that I know got into real estate, built portfolios, they found passive wealth, all of these things. And it seemed like such a foreign concept to me. I jumped at the opportunity. I got to start at ground zero, right? But like most things, I didn't erase the previous 30 years of my working experience. I had got the chance to bring all that with me and then put those eyeballs with that much experience onto something new. So it was fun, like the starting at ground zero and just consuming and learning and learning and learning. And real estate is so interesting. It's not a skill set per se. It's a series of skill sets stacked. And like essentially they're all different businesses. The financing, lenders, that's a stack. The people that are real estate agents and wholesalers and builders and people who've identified properties, that's a stack. And then don't even get me started into the construction guys. That's a stack. All of these things are different businesses, but they all are in this ecosystem of real estate. And for somebody who's just a massive consumer of information, like YouTube was made for somebody like me. I'm a visual learner. I'm an audio learner. I just don't like reading, right? It puts me to sleep. So today's day and age, I had the ability to go to so in depth in so many of these different industries. And then it was so much fun for me. So fast forward, I now work at a company who's at the forefront of making co-living or shared housing a normal name, right? It was Airbnb name, logo, recognition on short-term rentals. Same exact kind of concept. That's what we sold was that, hey, PadSplit was and is the leading name. It's synonymous with rent by the room. But rent by the room has been around since, beginning of time. Like my father-in-law, he grew up in Syracuse, New York, and he's telling me stories on how he, rented a room in a lady's house at one point, right? So he lived at a boarding house when he was in his teens. It's been around forever. But as, the economy and the times and housing changed, it's not really a thing. So it became this super niche-y thing. So here I am, I come and join this business, and it's a strategy that incorporates all these different components of real estate investment. I was enthralled, okay? So this is where it gets down to the question, when's the last time you invested in yourself to learn something new? And that's kind of the way I approach this. It wasn't about the salary because it sure really wasn't, what I was used to making or what I thought my worth was. But in my trade-off for that was, can I learn something new? And then can I monetize it somewhere down the road? I was investing in myself on the knowledge. So I came and I did the work, right? And it was super exciting because I was interacting with early adopter hosts and investors who, again, they saw the potential in 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 bedrooms in a house. And then how the market was evolving. Because at that time, Airbnb 17, 18 was peaking, 19 and 20 is peaking. And then all of a sudden that started getting beat up on by legislation and local municipalities and like the mass saturation of markets. So there's a life cycle to everything. I felt when I looked at this opportunity, this was it. This was on the beginning of their uphill climb. It started becoming the most common and most popular exit strategy because as the economics started pivoting, interest rates are going up, housing supply was going down, people weren't selling because they're stuck in 2 to 3 and 4% interest rates, and they can't go and buy a similar house when interest rates are 6, 7, 8%. So it was a challenging market. So the beauty of anything in a challenging market, the best operators surface to the top. The downside of that, when people are leaving one type of industry, they flee to the next hot thing. There's just the nature of it, right? There's this mob mentality. So I was at this, company where this was the name, right? This was the brand. And the strategy just made sense to me because at the end of what I know, the math doesn't lie. But as a business owner and an entrepreneur for the last 15 years, here's what I did always know. The math can be the math and the business model can be the business model, but it's the operations that generate the math. So I tasked myself to go and learn everything I could about the industry. So a year into my job, I actually went and purchased my first PadSplit property, my first co-living property. I put it on the platform. So I had both sides of understanding how the platform worked. I had access to all of these different investors because of the roles that I was in. I was there to help both sides of the marketplace, the member side, the customers, and the supply side, the investors. So I had so many interactions with both sides. And the thing that was interesting, and I've always felt this, is just because a platform is built, it's built on a thesis, right? That's the identified opportunity. And they build a widget. In this case, it was a digital two-sided marketplace and a platform. But the end operators who actually use whatever widget, they're the entrepreneurs, right? Those are the ones that are actually using it. And like all entrepreneurs, they just want to be profitable. They want to be efficient. So they're like me. They're high ADD. They're compulsive around things. They deep dive into things. They super focus in the things that they're working on. But it's essentially for the betterment and improvement of their own business. My wheelhouse, my people. So as I got to talk to all of these different investors, one of the first questions I used to always ask them is, listen, how are you bastardizing the product for your business? And the things as I was developing relationships with these investors that was so interesting was like how they were figuring out how to use a product that had its own limitations at that time to make their business work. And then what I ultimately started realizing was not all investors had the same thesis. Umbrella, yes, we rent by the room. Findings, how we rent by the room, to who we rent by the room, how we set up the house in order to rent by the room, the processes and systems that they had developed on their own through their own pain and grit. That's what made each individual owner unique. And then I started realizing there's some things in fundamental real estate that don't change. How you acquire a property. There's so many different ways to acquire properties. So I had to go teach myself around what wholesaling was. I had to go teach myself how to work with realtors, what the rules were there. I had to go teach myself the financing piece of it. What kind of different financing is there? Is there hard money? Is there private money? Is it equity investors? Is it cash? Traditional loans, conventional loans, non-conventional loans? What the hell's a non-QM loan? Had to learn the vernacular, the language of being in real estate, because as I sat in these rooms, and I'll show you, like, I have all of these conference badges. I would just attend the conferences because I got really comfortable talking to investors. So they started putting me in positions where I was talking about the business and introducing the business to existing real estate investors who who are looking for creative and alternative solutions to how to utilize their real estate investment skill set just in our exit. So during this day and age, this is where the rise of midterm rentals, my friend Jesse Vasquez, these are the guys that were doing Airbnb and arbitrage, mini houses, tiny homes, vacation areas. That's my boy, Rob Abasola, my friend, Henry Washington. These are all bigger pockets guys that I got to meet over my time here and attending all these different conferences. They each had their own lane. They each had their own niche. They each understood real estate is vast, but the riches are really in the niches. So I set out to become an expert at co-living. Sidebar, quick story. My son, who's now going to be almost 20 years old, when he first started playing sports, I grew up playing soccer. I wanted him to play soccer so bad. But he was a tiny little guy because his mom's all of 5 feet tall. So, and he's born like end of July. And in Georgia, he's essentially 7 or 8 months younger than everybody else. So he started playing soccer. He never once touched the ball. Ball would go this way. He'd come tramping along, and all his big, taller friends born in September and October the previous year would run and kick the ball. Then he'd smile and run the other way. Just wasn't physically the same size. So it wasn't an even playing field. So thank God he ended up going to some birthday party, and then he found ice skating. And the reason I pushed him so hard to get into ice skating, A, he loved it, and B, level playing field. Nobody knew how to ice skate. So at 6 years old, he started with everybody else. My son's amazing at hockey. I love watching him play. He's not going to be D1. He's not 6'3", 6'4". We have friends that are, right? But he loves playing hockey. He loves playing for the love of the game. But the one thing that he could do, he could skate. And that was one of the things that, this is going to be one of the reasons why I'm so confident that he's going to be successful in what he does, is because he learned how to develop grit. He learned how to develop the fact that he can outwork a lot of his shortcomings and a lot of his problems. He could just outwork it. So that work ethic is what I'm confident that he's going to, go out into the world and find his own lane and be successful. So getting back to this, that's how I felt about co-living. Nobody knows how to do this. Everybody's got their own version of it. They do it well or they don't do it well. All these people that are new that are coming in, they're learning on the fly. So for me, I had this distinct disadvantage where I was talking to so many investors. And if you're new to real estate, you will find that if you talk to people, they are so willing to share. I'm not going to give you the answers. I'm not going to do the work for you, but they will share. They will share their learnings. They will share their pains. They will share their successes. It's up to you to figure out how to do those things. But they'll tell you, one of the things that they had learned so you don't have to make the same mistakes. I felt like I got to speed up this learning curve because I had access to so many different investors. I knew how the platform worked from a technical standpoint. I knew what the ideas of the technical thing were trying to impact the business thing. I don't think the people building the technical thing fully understood the business thing, right? That's two different things to consider, but I came at it from a business owner standpoint. So when I first bought my first property, I had to go and be comfortable getting over my own emotions, my FOMO, my fear of missing out, FOBO, fear of a better offer. And I just needed to commit and buy a property, which I underwrote based upon the best learnings that I could. So that's how I got into real estate investing. Prior to that, I'd only owned my own personal home. I shared a vacation home with my sister. The reality was this was the first investment property we had. Real estate investment 101. If you don't have an exit strategy that's going to generate money, don't buy the property. I cannot tell you over the course of 5-6 years how many people that story, it sounded like a really good deal. So I bought it knowing that I'd figure out what to do with it later. Don't do that. Because the reality of it is if you don't have a plan to how this thing is going to pay for itself, you're just taking on a massive liability. You're going to have to pay the mortgage. You're going to have to pay the utilities. You're going to have to pay the lawn maintenance. You're going to have to pay the insurance. Doesn't matter. If you buy the house in the wrong neighborhood and it just sits empty, you might have to deal with squatters. You're going to have to deal with code enforcement because somebody's complaining that your lawn is overgrown. Don't buy properties without understanding the exit strategy. Okay. So with that in mind, this is how I got started. I bought my first house, walked with it, got a contractor, his entire network and ecosystem of people that are working there, brought him in. This is when the lessons, the tuition, quote unquote, starts. Because it ain't about the checklist. It's about the nuance behind everything. And as a business owner, and for you as a future entrepreneur or a current entrepreneur, you know this. It is not at the high level understanding of things. Money is made in the granular details, in the niches. That's where it comes from. So here comes this general contractor, and he had come really well recommended. He's done hundreds of these houses. I didn't understand enough nuance to understand that this guy had only done one version of co-living, the generation one that I dubbed it, the 2019, 2020, 2021 guys who are packing in as many rooms into a house as possible. I'm not a fan because I always came from a historical hospitality background. I've always been in the service industry. Even as a distribution company, they were my customers. So now I viewed this the same way. These members that were going to move into my house, they were my customers. And then I understood the financial models to understand I needed that person to stay and pay and stay for a long period of time. What I also noticed was the generation one investors, only a small percentage of those had a hospitality background. They were just looking at this like an investment, buy an asset, put some bodies in there, collect the rent, keep it moving. And then they were, paying back their back-end investors, their 15% preferred and all this other stuff. What I wanted to do was saying, if this is the field, how can I differentiate myself? And that's when I started developing this idea of hospitality mixed with the math of co-living. That combination is a success recipe that I would like to own that business. So I set out to own and build that business from the ground up, built on the foundation of co-living investment, which means simply, I buy a single family rental. Why is that important? Single family rentals, the benefits of those, they're so normal in today's world. There's so many different ways to finance them. But more importantly, the financing is 30 years of a DSCR or a traditional or conventional loan, which means by 30-year amortization of your loan, your mortgage payments go down and your risk is much lower, which means if done correctly, you can get 1%, 2% rules. If you bought them and you rented it out just to one family, their rule is 1%. 1% of the purchase price should be what you collect in rent. And if that's more than your mortgage, go ahead and buy it. And people complain about $100 a month, $200 a month of cash flow. You're not buying rental properties to replace all your cash flow and replace yourself and retire yourself. That's a really hard mission. But in this model of co-living, people were getting 2 to 3 times the top line gross revenue. Top line gross revenue means all the rent collected for the month. Meaning, my house, the houses that I have on average are $2,000 of market rate rent. I rent it to one family, I'm going to collect $2,000. I would be underwater because I have interest rates that are 8% and 6.75 or something like that, and 7%. So those interest rates are high, which means that my mortgage payment and insurance payment is more than $2,000, which means I'm underwater if I rent it to one family. 7-bedroom house, average room price is around $200. 7 times 200 is $1,400 a week times 4.33. You're looking at least, what am I looking at? 1, 2, 3, 4, and 12. $5,200 a month. If all my costs, including utilities, including insurance, including lawn maintenance, including all the bug spraying and all these pest control stuff, it's about $3,200, maybe $3,500, depending if it's a summer and I've got more lawn maintenance. $5,000 on average, $3,500. I make $1,500 of net cash flow. After I pay everybody that I owe, I pocket $1,500 per month. That is obnoxiously high, especially when you think about I bought it under the financing from a single family rental. So I coined these silly things. I want you to think about this. Single family acquisition, multifamily returns. Why is that so interesting? Because the arbitrage is I get 30-year financing on this single family house, but it's essentially a 7-bedroom apartment complex. So I'm getting 7 rents, and that's the arbitrage. That's what makes co-living so important. That's like the spreadsheet version. This is the evolution of where my mind goes. If I treat everybody like just a payer, and you have to remember, I didn't even get into my background. When I first got out of school, I started working for Anderson Consulting. That's how old I am. And then they switched their name to Accenture when I was there. But I worked in the utility field. I was a utility strategy and process consultant. And what that meant was that my primary business in 1998, 99, 2000 through 2004, federal government had mandated deregulation, which meant that it was usually kind of like down here in Georgia, right? We have one power company, Southern Company, and that's Georgia Power. So the rest of the country and different markets had deregulated, which means other competition can come in and market rates to be your power provider. In Georgia, we do that for gas. You do that for telephone and when they broke up the baby bells. So think about it. Company A can market to you for electric. Company B can market to you for electric. And then they pay a fee to the transmission company to get the power to you. That's essentially what I did for the longest time. Here's the learning that I took away from that, which kind of fueled, the part of my entrepreneurial journey, which is their systems in their old DB2 databases. It used to have a slot for the customer, and they just called it pay, or they did not treat their customers like customers because they didn't need to. It was a regulated industry. You want power, you had to come to them. But now they deregulated this entire industry. These companies had to learn what customer service was. They had to understand that, wait a minute, this person has choice. So that is how I started my professional life, was trying to educate and work with these companies that were on their own, trying to learn how to become customer service centric in an industry for decades. They just sent out a bill, and if you didn't pay, they cut off your power. Fast forward, that whole idea of treating your customers like your customers has always weaved itself throughout my entire life. When I left, I went to another consulting company, always on the sales side, working with the customer hand in hand. When I, were having my first child, Dylan, my wife was like, you cannot get on a plane every Monday and every Friday. So I had to find something local that took away the traveling. I ended up having the unique opportunity to find and buy a Boar's Head distribution company. One guy who was like the godfather of Boar's Head in Atlanta, he was selling off his pieces. I ended up buying one piece, and I spent 14 years doing that, which is amazing because the opportunities it gave me to run my own business, understand what I stunk at, back end books and, organization. I was really, really good at the customer facing side, really, really good at selling new customers because I loved the customer interaction. So with that all being said, that's weaved through my entire life of hospitality. I love food. I love making people feel comfortable. I love being able to provide a service before people even ask. Even when I was in high school, I made all my money going to, before I went to college, working as a busboy and a bar back and a waiter. And I worked the hotline and the cold line. I worked everything in a restaurant because I was really comfortable talking to customers. So with that in mind, that's the background of me that came into co-living. Was like, wait a minute, I learned more from my friends who are Airbnb investors about hospitality because I had rented plenty of Airbnbs and I knew what was really good. I knew what was really well thought out. I loved certain things about people who had thought through their customer experience and made it better for them. Simple example. If I'm going into a strange house, I love when the owners touch the labels. Dining room light, kitchen light, garbage disposal. These are the things, if you understand your customer's experience, you end up having such a better delivery and experience that they're talking about. And if you're sitting there providing a really good experience, that's what people remember. Like, think about the last time you went to a restaurant. Do you remember the food? Do you remember the waiter? Do you remember the ambiance? What do you remember the most? The most memorable meals that I have that I talk about with my friends, those meals are the ones where I remember the people that were there, the conversations that we had, the laughter that we had, and the shared memories that were made. I have no idea what I ate. I probably drank the same thing, so I only drink 1 or 2 drinks when I go out, but I definitely remember the people. So whenever we have memories and we're sitting around the fireplace and we have that conversation, hey, do you remember that meal? So I have memories with my friends. We used to have the gentleman's quarterly dinner at this amazing restaurant called Hal's, and it was like 18 of my buddies. And we would just have these crazy memories of walking through the back and going through the kitchen and then acting like good fellas because we're friends with the owner's son. It was amazing, but those have zero memories or recollection of the food. I brought that idea and I thought, how can I incorporate that concept into co-living? If everybody else out in this marketplace is selling a commodity, how do I incorporate a customer experience that makes it a little bit unique and a little bit different? Because understanding the business architecture with the fee structure of the platform that I was using, which is they transitioned from 12% for a platform fee to a booking fee. They take the first 10 days of an occupancy, which means that if I moved in today or if I had a customer move in today and the rent was $210, divide by 7, $30, multiply by 10, the first $300 of money collected. So essentially a week and a half, 10 days would go to the platform for a booking fee. That's not outrageous. If I had a regular rental and I had a real estate agent rent it for me, I'd pay her the first and last or the first month's rent. Just the cost of doing business. Everybody was in an upheaval and they were pissing and moaning all over the place. But if you just broke it down and said, all right, if that's the cost of doing business, what else in my business has to adapt? That's how you think as a business owner. So when I approached that, it was like, okay, our business is no longer occupancy, meaning like fill rooms. Because we were very negatively impacted. I was very negatively impacted if the person came in, had a bad experience and left. So I transitioned and like solely focused my business around the customer service portion with the intention of saying, how do I get this person to come into my room, in my house, enjoy themselves enough that they want to stay for a year? And how soon can I come back and ask them, do you have any friends that you think would enjoy the same experience? Because what I've learned is if they have a really good experience and there's certain things that they can hang their hat on, that experience is the one that they tell their friends about, their coworkers, their people in their ecosystem, their people that follow them on Instagram, their social circles that they run in, because that was my customer base. My friends that I told about this, they weren't going to come live in a rent by the room house. They might come invest in one, but they weren't the ones that are going to live there. Maybe their kids were as they're going through their transition from college into their first jobs. Someday, we'll work on that. But in reality, my customer base, their coworkers, they were all paying too much rent. So my question is, if you were an early adopter, you came to my house and you had a wonderful experience, can you refer? That's how my brain works. That was the origination story. So what I started doing, like most entrepreneurs, is I started writing everything down. And thank God for the advent of AI, because now I can take all of these learnings, dump them in the documents, have it processed through, and then spit out SOPs. But the thing about what I did in my business, I'm a tinkerer. I love to tinker. I love to test. I love to take an idea that is inspired by somebody else. I give you an example. Uber. I used to drive in the back of Ubers and I'm like, oh, look at all this. There's a little water bottle. There's plugs for my cell phone. And then there was a sign on the back of the headrest. If you had a great experience, please give us a 5-star review. It really makes an impact to my business. Can I do that myself? So in my rooms, I started asking for 5-star reviews. Why? I felt like I provided a great product and a great experience. So as soon as somebody came and experienced that great experience, I asked for a 5-star review because it makes an impact on my business. Same concept, not really foreign, right? So those are the kind of things where every day I'd get inspired by something. Another example, how do you know if your customers are having a good time? Most of the investors that were generation one, and I don't knock on generation one, they had enough nuts and they have everything, the balls to get in there and actually, try something new. I give them much respect. But the reality of it was they ran it like a spreadsheet. They were not selling a customer experience. They were selling rooms. And when they first started, there were no rooms on the platform. So imagine in 2018, 2019, seeing a room for $99 a week. Those rooms filled so fast. So they had more demand than they had supply. I came into the market when there were 4,000 rooms. Today, there's 11,000 rooms just in Atlanta, 32,000 across the entire country. So I was coming into a competitive marketplace. I recognized that. So I needed to figure out ways to distinguish myself in my experience. Couple limitations that you'll see there, but this has been my journey. So my focus was on how do I convey what the member experience is going to be? How do I understand my customer journey and apply it to my business? So that's why I ended up creating a company called CoLivingiQ, because internally at the company that I was working for, there was no host training. Ironically, like within the company itself, there's only like 3 or 4 people that owned a product that they were, using on PadSplit. And those people, they weren't great operators either. Nobody was intentionally going through the process of being like, how can I be the dopest operator out there? Whereas for me, that's all I cared about. It was like, how can I be the dopest operator out there? A, because I'm crazy competitive, and B, I'm really, really curious. So I wanted to constantly use my houses as a testing for what do I do for acquisition and conversion? What kind of product, meaning like what kind of bedrooms? So I took the first one, my first property, and I followed the checklist because I didn't know any better. Bought the crappy Amazon furniture that was on the list. And most everything that new hosts were being told to do was with the premise of cheapest. How do I put the most rooms in a house to make the most money, provide the cheapest size room? How do I put the least amount of crappy furniture in there at the lowest cost? Hello, Amazon. How do I, it was essentially selling a commodity. Well, I grew up selling deli meat for the good bulk of my career, right? I grew up working for Accenture, which was a brand name consulting company. Our rates were way higher than everybody else's. So there's value in brand, especially in a world of commodities. If somebody is willing to pay $15 a pound for a boar's head ham, when the Publix ham was $8 a pound, what was the differential, right? That's the power of brand. So my experiences as an entrepreneur really impacted the way I approach this business, because I don't believe co-living works without some form of hospitality. Let me rephrase that. I know co-living works if you just want to sell a commodity. That's not the business I wanted to run. I viewed it as there's only so much space for commodity selling. And I don't have houses that I bought in 2017 or 2008 with no mortgages on them. So I had a floor for how low I can put my prices. That's understanding the math. That's understanding the financing. These investors that I was talking to, they had bought their houses in 2017 for $20,000. Now they're worth $400,000. They have no note. Every dollar they make is profit. Not me. I've got $2,200, $2,000 mortgages on my house. So I needed to figure out a way not to be required to compete on price. So the only way that I knew how to do it was based on my own background, which was, how do I focus on brand? And what is my brand going to be? How do I tell that story? What is my product going to be? How do I deliver a product that tells a story? So the difference between my first house and my second house was drastic. The first house was done your way. I learned the ropes. The second house was done my way. And the third and fourth houses were done with an iteration of every single one that I wanted to test. Different exits, not on PadSplit, different business, but all under the premise of shared housing. because the math for shared housing, I was a rent by the room investor, not necessarily tied to one platform. I happen to know the most about PadSplit because I work there. But direct contract where it's one price pays for all the people in the house, I'll take that all day long because it secures my revenue. Working with nonprofits where they cover damages and they cover all rents, I'll take that revenue all day long. But I think that the math for rent by the room, that math is amazing. But what business am I running underneath it? That's one of the things that I just wanted to keep understanding and defining and put some systems to and testing and testing and testing. That's where I find joy, is that businesses are living things. They're malleable, right? They're impacted by the economy. They're impacted by trends or impacted by all sorts of different things. So the nuances in this, think about this. My first house was a 3-bedroom, 3-bathroom. It ended up converting to a 7-bedroom, 3-bathroom, 1 master. 2 different floors, 3,600 square feet, big ass house, right? And size for houses for me is like one of the biggest things that I look at is I never want my customers to feel like they're on top of themselves. Like they're late, like the rooms are so adjacent, they're cut up like crazy. The hallways are really skinny. I want my houses to feel spacious. And every single time somebody new's moved in, they're like, I cannot believe that there are 9 bedrooms in this house. So second property I put on was a 5-bedroom, 2-bathroom house. That property ended up converting over into a 9-bedroom, 6-bathroom house with 4 of those rooms being master bathrooms. Let me explain a little bit about why. Here's what you learn in the nuance of the business. When customers want to book a room, what's the most important thing that they look at? What's the first thing that they ask about? What's the first type of room that books? It's a private bathroom. I don't care if you want to save money from, an apartment complex, but everybody loves their own bathroom. And if you can afford it, all day long, people want to book the bathroom with the private bathroom first. Some other people don't care, and that's fine, right? Whether you're going to rent a room in my house or you're going to rent a room in somebody else's house, people do care about the experience. If you tell me it's going to look like a hotel room and I open the door and it looks like a hotel room, they're very pleasantly surprised. If they see a picture on the marketplace and it looks like an amazing 5-star hotel and they open it up and it looks like a trap house and a crime scene, they're going to be very, very pissed. That's just human nature. Expectations, reality. Guess what lives in this space right here? Resentment. So if you think about your business that way, we are delivering a product that somebody has to take a flyer on. And typically they're new. They have no idea what to expect. They don't know what living with other people. A lot of these people, they haven't lived with other humans since they moved out of their house with their family. Not a lot of college kids are living and moving back into single room occupancy, right? So like, oh, I did this when I was in college. No, you didn't. You as an investor who owns this house, those are the memories that you have of living with other people. But there were 4 of your friends that were in your fraternity or your sorority and you lived together. 2 different experiences. These are individual working professionals that you hope with no criminal background that you hope. And then you put them into a house. So what I started studying was if my business is to get long tenure and have people stay for a really long time, who's doing that the best? And what I realized was it's in Europe. It's hostels. It's a normal way of living over there. So I spent entire years just kind of listening to podcasts and reading and understanding and participating in communities online. How were European co-living property and managers and owners cultivating culture, community? And how was that community weaved into the member experience? So I tested it. My house, everything starts with the idea, if you're moving into my house, you're joining a community. You should know that up front. And if it's not something that you want to do, why did you apply? It tells you right in the heading, community-focused co-living. Are you actively working? Are you trying to improve your life? Do you want to live with like-minded people? I tell you that in the beginning because as a marketer, I wanted to weed out the people who didn't want to participate in it because there are plenty of people who don't like other human beings, but are in an economic situation where they needed to go rent a room. Because here's what's out there in the rest of the world. If I can't qualify for an apartment complex, I have very few options. I can sleep on somebody's couch if they let me. I can sleep in my car if I really have to. I can go to a weekly motel and pay almost $75 to $100 a night, $700 a week. Get my properties at $190, $200, $800 for the month, all utilities included. And then my rooms, I told you the evolution from Amazon crap just to the second house. I found a hotel liquidator. Because what I wanted to be able to do was, how do I make the story consistent? So for every customer that comes in, they know this is hotel furniture. It looks like hotel furniture because it is hotel furniture. The second house in Stone Mountain, all the furniture came from the Marriott in New Orleans, right down to the painting that's on the wall that's all Mardi Gras themed. So really heavy furniture. It's not moving anywhere. The headboards are bolted into the walls. The desks are workstations because there's plugs that came from the hotels. Like, what other industry has figured out what kind of furniture is best for people that are coming in and staying into a hotel room or the hotel business, right? So why wouldn't I leverage their decades and hundreds of years of understanding what the best furniture is and just adopt it? Curiously, it's cheaper than all the crap that I had to assemble that came off of Amazon. Lesson learned, right? But you can't unsee these things once you see them. And that's the difference between like a new entrepreneur and somebody who's been around for a while. You think they're seasoned, old, wily veterans. No, they got themselves punched in the face 20 years ago. They just can't unsee the lessons that they've seen. That's why I'm such a huge proponent of communities. That's why eventually when I created this coaching company, I did it to fill this void. I worked for a company and a platform that was the mothership. They were the synonymous name with co-living. They had an idea of how the platform should work, but they were a business. It was two-sided marketplace. I worked with hosts that were the users of said platform, but the way they were running their business wasn't exactly the same way that the platform thought that they were running it. So you had to find some kind of gap in between. The platform was telling people, hey, earn 2 to 3 times income. If you have a 4-bedroom house turning into an 8-bedroom house, 2 bathrooms, don't put in any more bathrooms. You don't need to. The minimum requirement is 4 bedrooms to 1 bathroom. The minimum requirement is the fire code. As a new investor, that all sounds like it makes sense. 8 feet by 10 feet with one wall minimum being 7.5 feet long. And just like anything else, if I set requirements, the entrepreneur will do some goofy ass crap. I saw a guy had a 20-foot long wall and it was like 6 feet across. So you're literally living in a long rectangle. Like, oh, it's 80 square feet. Come on, man. That doesn't even make sense. The bed was barely, fitting along this way. It's just stupid. But he was ready to argue for the fact that it was 80 square feet and bigger, 20 feet long by 6 feet long. Like, what are you? So I digress. What I've learned was very few people approached this business from the way I wanted to, which was hospitality centric. Why is it hospitality centric? Because if my North Star and my business goal was to extend people's tenure so I can get quote unquote lifetime value. So in the business world, you'll hear things like customer acquisition cost. What's it cost you to get a new customer? In our world right now, that's the booking fee, the 10-day booking fee. And then the lifetime value is how much revenue are you collecting from said customer that one time you paid for that acquisition fee. That's how businesses run, right? I paid $300 to get this customer. I have customers that have been here since day one, $19,000 to $20,000 of income over the course of 18 months, 2 years. And for that one room, and I pay $300 for that customer. Hello, the math works. People can bitch and moan about what percentage they're paying. The reason they're paying such a high percentage is because people keep turning over. Instead of pointing at themselves and their business and asking the question, what's the problem in my business? The problem in your business is people aren't staying. How are you addressing that? I don't know. Well, how do you screen for the members? I don't know. This is where I try to introduce people to the concept of reverse engineering. Like I reverse engineer everything. I want to know why you do something, not just what you do. I want to know how it impacts it. I want to know which type of customer is the best customer to do that, talk track or playbook or script or whatever the case may be. I want to know everything. So in my business, I reverse engineered the best customers who stayed the longest time. And I've learned so many different things, from how do we set up our listing in our house. Like how you set up your house has massive impacts on the type of business and revenue you collect. I have students that have come to me and they're like, oh, this is going to be a 12-bedroom house. And by the time I'm done talking to them and asking questions like, if you were a brand that you're developing, because you are, right? Like, God forbid, knock on wood, if all these platforms went away, where would you list your business? Because your business isn't just going to shut down. You've got 8 or 9 bedrooms in your house. Like, what are you going to do with it, right? What brand are you porting over to the next platform? How are you marketing your business on a different platform? How are you marketing your business on Facebook Marketplace? Like, you have to be able to explain the experience your customers are going to get. But if you don't know it yourself, then what are you building toward? So when I started asking my students this question, it changed everything. Everybody, if they're in the middle of a conversion process, ended up reducing at least 1 bedroom. They're like, wait a minute. It makes sense not to cram all these people in there. And there's so many different financial reasons to do this. Like, I know my experience and I know the 600-700 different investors that I've talked to. I've tried to take out best practices, but some guys are in, New Orleans, and some guys are in Phoenix, and some guys are in, Baltimore and townhouses, all different businesses. But the core principle is the ones who treat their customers, not tenants, not members, but customers like they're their customers, find the most success. Human dignity is a universal trait. I don't care if you come from the poorest projects in the world or if you came from the biggest Beverly Hills mansions in the world. Human dignity is a natural trait. If you can provide any human dignity, that's really what people can ask for, right? Like, and in today's world where it's like the anonymous blog crapper and the, instant gratification, I'm going to poop on you, in the comments section just to poop on. Trust me, like I have a YouTube channel. I see it. I got Instagram posts. I see it. And then like my friends are like, oh, it's okay. It's good engagement. Like, what happened? Anyway, I digress. So with that all being said, if you can treat your customers with some dignity and be proud of the product that you have, then you can set an expectation and a bar for how they should behave. And then all of a sudden, like when you hold people to certain expectations, you'd be amazingly surprised how they come up to meet your expectations. I hear it from Nick Saban and everything that he says. How you do one thing is how you do everything. That's how he sets the bar for excellence. Well, if you do that in your business, it's kind of the same concept, right? Every time I go into a Quick Trip gas station, guess what they say? Welcome to Quick Trip. If you go into a Chick-fil-A, they don't say you're welcome. They say, it's my pleasure. These are trained parts of their business. That's why I love Chick-fil-A employees who are living in my house versus a McDonald's or a Bojangles employee, because that person has no standards. Yet the Chick-fil-A has standards in which this person has to live there. There's so many different little nuggets, and I'm going to give you 3 or 4 of them if you're in this business right now. Why do I love security guards? Because I don't really trust and love the background screening that PadSplit does. I don't really trust and love the economic income screening. Why? Because I've had too many of my own personal experiences where it wasn't deep enough and they missed something. So I've had to take on that piece of it to de-risk my business because they don't own my property. I do. They don't have to deal with a problem after the member moves in. I do. But it's okay. I accept those responsibilities as a co-living operator who owns an asset, who puts it on their platform. I treat them like the vendor that they are. They're a vendor partner for me, but at the end of the day, I have to pay them for a service. No different than the utility company, no different than the pest, spray guy, and no different than the lawn guy. It's just a bigger number. But at the end of the day, I know what I pay for, and I get the most out of the platform that I can. That being said, I have to protect my business. And as an entrepreneur, you should too, right? So this is my origination story. This is how I got started. I'm going to continue to test it. I'm going to continue to see if I can stretch the goalposts of what is possible within co-living. Because I think in the future, an owner economy where entrepreneurs actually own assets, it's one of the very few ways that you're going to be able to find success. Because think about this. I went to go work at this company for the knowledge that I was going to get back. I knew I was being underpaid, but it wasn't. I agreed to the salary they paid me for the work that I put out. I did the work that they wanted me to do, but I took the opportunity to get more knowledge and more experience, which then is an investment in myself, which now I have a coaching company and I have properties and a portfolio that I'm building. I'm working through generational wealth building. Like, that was an investment in myself. Not a lot of people have the ability to stop doing what they're doing, to go take another job and invest themselves in that way. That's why I have students that come in and they're like, I'll trade dollars for your education and your implementation. That's the economy we work in. Anybody can watch all of my free stuff and they can go watch hundreds and hundreds of hours. It's not the education, man. It is the confidence and understanding the nuance behind the things that you hear. I keep coming across so many people who drank the Kool-Aid from the sales department because that's their job, is to sell you on 2 to 3 times income. But then none of them know how to operate the damn thing. And they're like, wait a minute, I got this house and it's empty, or I got the house full of these people who aren't paying. Like, what now? Well, if you don't know how to run your own business, are you really an entrepreneur or just a real estate investor that owns a lot of liabilities? That's a question you really need to ask yourself. But I love working with entrepreneurs that want to build a business, that are curious about improving the business and tinkering with it, and then trying to find systems that are successful for them. Because trust me, of the students that I work with, they're all a little bit different. They all lean into their strengths, and that's what the focus of their business is. I've got a lady in Kansas City. I love her to death. She went from sitting on the sidelines for years, knowing she wanted to be a real estate investor. She just needed somebody to hold her hand and give her the confidence to jump over this threshold. Now she's talking in front of new investors because her entire self-identity changed. Her confidence changed. Her ability to figure it the F out. Like, she's a monster now, but I'm so proud of her because she knew who she wanted to become. She just had a hard time getting there on her own. So a little bit of push, a little bit of love, and a little bit of confidence from somebody else. That's what I've figured out that I really love to do. Even when I was a distributor for Boar's Head, it wasn't just delivering the bologna. It was actually training the deli associates. That was part of the agreement, that I loved training the brand new deli associate. I loved when I helped them understand the business so they became deli managers. It changed the trajectory of their life from $12, $13 an hour to getting $70,000 in full benefits. They never thought they could get there. But the ones that cared about customer service, the ones that understood the business behind it, they progressed through really quickly because the rest of the field, or the peloton as I like to call it, they weren't doing those things. And that's kind of what I'm looking for in this world, is like, as I started this coaching company, I'm looking for those entrepreneurs who are like, I can succeed here because I understand what the field is doing and I can do a little bit different to set myself apart. That's a differentiation between being an entrepreneur and just somebody who owns assets. That's my origination story. It continues, and I'm so excited about it because this is a living business. Every day I learn something new. Talk to you soon. Enjoy your day.